We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
Wait, there might be a better way to do this. Yeah, maybe not. I'm not gonna spend my time figuring that out. Hello and welcome to Rainbow Shelter News. I am the host, Osman in the Dark, and we are talking about the variety of news this week. There's a lot of racism. In fact, this week, I'm just gonna say right now, content warning, there's probably trigger warnings for rape, murder, death, assault, that sort of stuff. Racism. So much racism. But tonight we are going to talk about the events going on, let's start with the news of the passings. Jamie Dupree passed unexpectedly on Sunday at a home in Mobile, Alabama. Basically, he's someone who has fought for numerous civil rights related stuff, and at the very least, family members have also done that. His sibling having died 5 years ago. Ryan Channing, ex-boyfriend of Olympian Ian Thorpe, dies at 32, which is just tragic that he died that way. So he's taken to the hospital while filming a Netflix documentary on his skincare brand Block in Indonesia. The cause of death is still unknown. Although the 32-year-old had COVID a few weeks prior, as of now, the death is unrelated. Similarly, trans man was shot in Oakland, Michigan. Reportedly shot to death by his girlfriend of almost 2 years in their apartment. Or was reportedly shot. Ruby Taverner, a 22-year-old white trans woman, also fatally shot her own brother before fleeing in witness care. So, Ruby's brother, Raymond 25, also killed in the couple apartment. Yeah, it's It's a lot of death. Raymond. Yeah, it seems to be a more personal incident, but the death still stands. Unexpectedly, like I said, lots of racism. Let's start with Buffalo. So at least 10 people killed in Buffalo supermarket shooting. The 18-year-old was a student at Sunny Broom. My understanding is that there was a lot of white supremacist related leanings on when it came to the shooter. And yeah, it's awful. It's just, this shouldn't happen to anyone. You know, the mass shooting. Well, I mean, mass shooting obviously shouldn't happen to anyone, but as far as I can tell, from I think what I've read elsewhere, it does appear to be white nationalist related. And as such, we are here to mention the shooter, the victims of the shooting. Aaron Salter was working as a security guard. Catherine Massey was shopping when she was killed. Celestine Cheney was shopping with her sister. By the way, mostly black people were murdered by this white person. Went out of his way to go all the way to a primarily black neighborhood to kill black people. That's what it seems to be. Robert Drury was getting groceries for dinner. Pearlie Young was feeding people in her community. Ruth Whitfield was a mother to the motherless. Hayward Patterson was a dedicated member at his church. Andrew McNeil was purchasing a birthday cake for his son. Geraldine Chapman Talley was always smiling. Margus D. Morrison was a family man. And 20-year-old Sarah Goodman survived the shooting. Which, I mean, I realize a lot of people died. It's obviously there are a lot of people survivors. A lot of people survived, but it's still tragic. All the good people murdered for some inane reason, to try to prove themselves. I don't know. 7 people injured in shootings that are related to each other in North Carolina. So there's an active investigation in North Carolina on shooting. Someone trying to do I think there are 4 people shot near Prince of Peace Baptist Church, also nearby. One of those victims refused medical attention, while 3 others were brought to the hospital. 24-year-old arrived at the hospital recognized as a seventh victim. No details have been revealed on the suspects and the shooting amid 3 other fatal incidents across the country. 3 other ones. I know about the Buffalo one. Oh, the 20 people injured in Milwaukee following 2 shootings after an NBA game. I appear to have missed this one. I don't know how I missed this one. Yeah, there was apparently there was a shooting outside a Bucks game. Devastating violence. Okay. Maybe it's because they only had so much information. And 5 people were injured and 1 killed in the Geneva Presbyterian Church. Now that one I know is related to China and Taiwan, so I didn't want to get into too much I didn't know. I don't know. I don't think I have the capability to know enough about that, understand enough about that situation to even talk about it personally. And plus, I don't want to say things which relate to I do not want to accidentally promote aspects of the anti-Asian mentality, especially in California. And that was where my mind first went to when reading that story, but yeah. Biden's apparently going to grieve with the community, but I don't know that he will do any active work. So, sorry. Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. Mayor's Office and Media Entertainment. Basically, closed captions. There are caption requirements in New York so that people who are deaf or hard of hearing can actually watch movies. You know, the thing that most people get to do in the movie theater. This is kind of forcing the hand so that people can actually, you know, watch the movies, which is really important. Yeah, just captions right there on the screen in the movie theater. It's one of those rare things where disabled people are listened to for some reason. At least a little. So, Texas. Oh. Texas is still a bit of a shithole, but the abortion laws inhibit care for miscarriages, which this is not super surprising, but it needed to be brought up. Basically, Texas law passed last year lists several medications as abortion-inducing drugs, and largely bars their use for abortion after the 7th week of pregnancy. But 2 of those drugs, misoprostol and mifepristone, are the only drugs recommended in the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists guidelines for treating patients after an early pregnancy loss. So, The challenge is that the treatment for an abortion and the treatment for a miscarriage are exactly the same. Miscarriages occur in roughly 1 out of 10 pregnancies, and the pharmacy has said, we don't know whether or not you might be using this medication for the purposes of abortion, which is the awful part of it. So, because anyone who aids and abets an abortion, even if they're, providing necessary medication for miscarriage, they can be fined $10,000. It's a lot of disincentivizing of just basic bodily function. And it's just awful. Just absolutely awful. But yeah, it's, obviously they don't care about women, lawmakers who put laws like this into place. The Texas Supreme Court rules the governor can't order parents of trans kids to be investigated for child abuse. So there has been some wins. The ACLU basically won the general lawsuit against that sort of thing from happening. The parents getting charged with abuse for, taking care of trans kids and treating trans kids as themselves. Because of course. In refusing to listen things are still complicated though. Things are still very complicated. So here's something that occurred in Texas as well. Once again, warning for all this stuff, but
hey guys, so check out this video of this little boy coming to my house, beating on my door with a whip, trying to attack my daughter. Take a look at this. Also, please like, share, and comment.
Little boy, you better get your ass from off my porch beating on my door like this. I will call the police. You need to leave. Don't you ever beat on my goddamn door like that. Go. Okay.
So after the video progresses, my husband goes over to speak to his father about what this like. Take a look at this.
yeah, this is
He has a gun behind his back.
We're showing you the video.
But yeah, there was yeah, oh geez, yeah, no, this is absolutely just it is I had to keep this story just because of, just as a spotlight in terms of how awful this is. That I assume that that kid's parent is like a member of the KKK. I have to assume, with an attitude like that, like trying to go after like white kid trying to go after a black kid with a whip. Yeah, that's some racism taught by the family. And sorry, the reason I had to wear the Steph Curry shirt, it's Steph Curry, like I can't not do a Steph Curry story if Steph Curry shows up in the news. It's a requirement. Steph Curry graduates from college 13 years after leaving it for the NBA, which is just it's just a nice thing. I only had this because like Steph Curry is my favorite basketball player, and you know, it's just like I don't even know what he graduated from. I'm just like, I don't care. I am such a Steph Curry fangirl. But yes, that's the way. Bachelor of Arts degree with a major in sociology. So bachelor's in sociology, which actually that's kind of nice. I know. I don't know all of what Steph Curry has done for various black communities. I know LeBron James has done like a ton of advocacy work that you don't see on a day-to-day basis. But California, Stanford University once again finds a noose on its campus. Did I mention, by the way, I mentioned there's no way for me to, it's trigger warning for so much of this show, but yeah, it's just the level of awful racism. That's why I said it's a tidal wave of racism. Yeah, Steph Curry has a sociology degree. He just graduated, which is awesome. But yeah, no, this is such a tidal news of a noose that was found last night outside of Stanford undergraduate residence hall. And once again finds it sounds like this is something that has happened before. It's just officials note that this isn't the first time a noose has been found on campus. 2 other instances, once in July 2019 and once in 2021. So yes, noose last year too, yes. That is correct. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I would ask why people are so awful. It's a lot of people are better at communicating stuff, and more people are showing how the world really is. And these people have always been here, but now we know. So, New Hampshire Republicans want to force teachers to police students' gender expression, because of course they do. Republicans want teachers to report change in students' gender expression or gender identity to their parents, regardless of whatever risk that might have for the child, because they're not ones to care about children. So, New Hampshire State Senate just passed HB 431, a bill that would force teachers to out LGBTQ students to parents, potentially endangering the children's welfare, also the children's lives, not just their well-being. So, according to Aaron Reed, the bill would require teachers to notify parents about changes in a student's gender expression or identity. Subsection states in these terms the right to be notified promptly when any school board, school district, school administrative unit, school administrator, or other school employee initiates, investigates, or finds the need for any action by school authorities relating to the student pursuant to school policies governing student conduct, truancy, dress code violations, sexual harassment, bullying, hazing, behavior management, and intervention, substance use, suicide prevention, gender expression or identity, disability accommodation, and special meal prescriptions. So, like, yeah, it forces the kids to be outed, and it's just awful. Yeah, it's at least the Florida amendment didn't pass, which did. Just as bad. So, speaking of Florida, video shows parent hurling racial slurs at black teen outside of a middle school. Now, the video is not shown. It's expletive, you better get the expletive away from me. You better get away from me. I'll go to jail, but I'll knock you on your expletive. The middle-aged parent tells the children on camera. Listen, I mean, it basically trying to soften the N-word. Get the expletive out of my face. Expletive, soft N-word, mumbling cracker, he added. Now, I don't know. This is just an awful thing going on because, of course, there are people who will go out of their way to bully children if they're black or any sort of marginalized group. And then children said some stuff back, and he's just like, I'm proud to be effectively, I'm proud to be white. I'm happy to see with what I see in the mirror every day. Are you happy when you see black in the mirror? Which is so many levels of racism. It's just, and once again, this is just like an example of things that people have to deal with. Black people have to deal with racism like this, and I'm sure there are plenty of times when people don't hear about it. These are just the times we do hear about it. Anti-abortion activists could set sights on medication abortions following Roe v. Wade's planned overturn. I mean, yeah, because I keep forgetting it's technically not overturned yet. I mean, there's a plan to, but like, states are working to restrict medication abortions, which can be ordered online or by mail. basically trying to strip every woman, every person from rights to bodily autonomy, unless they're like a cis straight white guy. Those are the only people protected under this. But in 22 states, including Tennessee, Kentucky, and South Dakota, have set limits on medication abortions, which include prohibiting the delivery of pills by mail, limiting provisions to physicians, limiting gestational age for use, or by otherwise banning medication abortion entirely. Pro-lifers have dubbed the pills as chemical abortion, and allege that's risky for women to take them. They always say it's always risky for people to have bodily autonomy. It's risky to transition. It's risky to do all this stuff, and it's not that it's risky. They just don't want it to happen. It's risky to their sense of cognitive dissonance, but yeah. So currently the Education Department to update disability regulations. I can words. So the federal education officials are finally going to update regulations, disability regulations, in the Section 504 and the Rehabilitation of the Rehab Act of 1973. The civil rights law bars disability discrimination at schools and other public and private programs that receive federal money. While the world has undergone enormous changes since 1977, the department's Section 504 regulations have remained, with few exceptions, unaltered. Yeah, it is unclear what sort of updates to the education department. Sorry, my bad. Nothing's gonna happen. But officials said that they intend to strengthen and protect the rights of students with disabilities. Nothing meaningful is gonna happen, I should say. I take back everything I said. I was deceived by the headline. That was my problem. This is why it's always helpful to read into it, or at the very least, I have very little faith in humanity because of it's just no timetable, just a lot of words. So look, I couldn't bring myself to I don't want to just have, I don't want everything to be a downer. So GOP candidate loses her mind over menstrual products in school restrooms. This is an absolute implosion of the family, Republican candidate Bridget Barton said about the trans-inclusive new law. So, a new Oregon House law, the Menstrual Dignity Act, has garnered the negative attention of a slew of right-wing politicians and pundits. The act is trans-inclusive and indicates that menstrual hygiene products should be placed in all school restrooms, which it should in general. Hell, like, arguably, like, if you can get free menstrual pads or tampons or whatnot, like, even if you don't need to use them, the ability to be able to, like, hand them out if someone needs them in an emergency is just helpful in general. So the bill states student bathrooms means bathroom accessible by students, including gender-neutral bathroom designated for females, and bathroom designated for males. Don't like the wording, but... And goes on to indicate that at least 2 bathrooms in every public school building should have both pads and tampons available free of charge during the 2021 and 2022 school year. Beginning in the 2022 to 2023 school year, all bathrooms should have at least 1 dispenser. Radical leftist woke policies are destroying Oregon, from our streets to our businesses to our schools, she said. I'm respectful of all, but it's fair to let little boys be little boys and little girls be little girls. What is this person about? Barton, who is described as a long shot candidate, especially with her attitude in Oregon, says that period products will be very confusing for children and lead to depression. Don't know where this person has come up with that. Yeah, this is just... That was just silly. So, new Louisiana Don't Say Gay bill would ban LGBTQ teachers from coming out. Louisiana Republicans wanted to pass the bill so much they used a rare procedure to revive it and get it to a vote. So, Republicans in the Louisiana House have used a rare procedure to revive a Don't Say Gay bill that had previously died after a bipartisan vote had stalled the bill in the House Education Committee. Bill HB 837. Periods are gross and dirty. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the attitude. But, the bill, HB 837, would prohibit kindergarten through 8th grade public school employees from discussing sexual orientation and gender identity in general with students. The law would also prevent kindergarten through 12th grade employees from discussing their own sexual orientations and gender identities, something that would make it illegal for teachers to reference their own gender or marital status, although it's unlikely that the bill will be enforced against cisgender or heterosexual teachers. Because, you know, they can discuss their gender identity. So, State Department, Dodie Horton sponsored the bill, but it failed to advance out of the House. But this last week, the House voted to override the committee's decision. So, obviously, it's part of the nationwide push by Republicans to ban LGBTQ issues from schools. Republicans have called opponents of these bills pedophilic groomers, effectively encouraging violence against them. Because most people hate people who groom others. Generally. Although there are some groomers who get far too much of a pass, like Trump and someone in a story coming up that would likely get more of a pass from the general populace of at least conservatives. Second, if passed, the bill would likely roll back what little progress Louisiana schools have made in LGBTQ inclusion. 75% of state students reported experiencing anti-LGBTQ harassment in schools. These numbers will likely worsen if LGBTQ issues are banned from classrooms. So, the Trump-appointed judge partly blocks the ban on trans youth healthcare in Alabama. So, trans youth in Alabama were thrown a lifeline, however brief, when a Trump-appointed federal judge blocked part of a ban that would prevent them from accessing healthcare. So, U.S. District Judge Lyles Burke issued an order late Friday night that threw, on the 13th of May, that threw a spanner into a Republican plan to make it a felony for medical professionals to prescribe gender-affirming treatments. It delays enforcement of the law. Other parts of the bills, such as a ban on gender-affirming surgeries on minors that don't even happen, and forcing counselors to out trans youth to their carers remain, however. Of course. So, the Vulnerable Child Compassion Protection Act would make it a felony offense punishable by up to a decade in prison to prescribe a trans young people puberty blockers or hormone therapies. Considering that such treatments can be life-saving, anti-trans healthcare bans have faced opposition from some of America's largest medical institutions, like the American Medical Association. But yeah. The judge rules that medical experts, not Republicans, are best qualified in trans healthcare. But Burke, who was appointed by anti-LGBTQ plus President Donald Trump in 2018, said that his ruling in Alabama failed to provide credible evidence to show that transitioning medications are experimental. So, like, yes, the ban's not going. The current law is not can't be enacted on getting trans young trans people medication. It will be enacted, or the outing of trans people and any LGBTQ people, that part is. Deaf-blind communities may be creating a new language of touch. I'm sure this has probably been going on for like way longer than this, but Protectile began as a movement for autonomy and a system of tactile communication. Now some linguists argue it is becoming a language of its own. I assume that's a similar thing to ASL, because ASL is its own language. Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Began bilingual deaf program. Instruction was in ASL, but students were grouped based on their ability to read English. In high school, Clark stopped trying to follow ASL visually and began using tactile reception, feeling words with his hands. This helped, but miscommunication was common. ASL is a fundamentally visual language. The dominant hand gestures for the word stamp and fun, for instance, look very similar, except that stamp begins near the mouth, whereas fun starts at the nose. I don't know those words in ASL. Yes or no questions are signified with raised eyebrows, and sentences can be negated with the shake of a head. When Clark would reply in ASL, he'd have no idea how the person was responding or whether they were still paying attention at all. He said that it was like talking to a wall. So, literature class. So in 2013, Clark attended a training in Minneapolis in Protactile, a new movement that was encouraging deaf-blind people to reject the stigma in American culture against touch, which often leaves them cut off from the world around them. According to Protactile principles, rather than waiting for an interpreter to tell her about the apples available at the grocery store, a deafblind person should plunge her hands into the produce bins. If a sighted friend pulls out her phone in the middle of a conversation to check the weather alert, she should bring her deafblind interlocutor's hand to her pocket as well to understand where the weather forecast is coming from. Protactile includes a set of practices to make tactile communication more legible. One of its creators, a deafblind woman named Angelica Nuccio, showed Clark how it worked. Also, apologize if I totally slaughtered the name. They sat facing each other, legs touching, and Nuccio rested Clark's hand on her knee, explaining that as she spoke, he could tap to indicate they understood, like nodding, a practice called back-channeling. In ASL, pronouns are articulated as points in space. You might designate Minneapolis as a spot in the air near your left shoulder and Seattle as a spot near your right. And those gestures stand for cities. Nuccio showed Clark how to indicate them as points on the body instead, a two-fingered press on each shoulder. In the years since Protactile has spread across the country today, most deaf-blind adults have heard of Protactile's call to place touch at the center of their lives. Clark, who has become a leader in the movement, compared it to the Deaf Pride movement of the 1980s, where more deaf people began speaking ASL in public, insisting that hearing people gesture back. Which I still need to learn ASL. It's a big problem. I naturally have sorry, and the camera's reversed. I don't know if it comes off right. Maybe it comes off better with the camera reversed, actually, because then you're facing me. Wait. No, that would not be you facing me. Whatever. Still several linguists have come to believe that among some of its frequent users, Protactile is developing into its own language with words and grammatical structures that have diverged from those of ASL. Which, this is not surprising that it's different, but it's another thing that I want to learn now. That almost feels Protactile. Look, that almost feels in some ways better than ASL or English. Like, I'm just gonna have to learn those three languages and all the other languages I want to learn. I have a problem. But yes, this is a worthwhile thing to get ahead on or whatnot. So the autistic community is having a reckoning with ABA therapy. We should listen. So I don't know how many of you know. Obviously, I'm well, not necessarily obviously, but I am definitely autistic and have been a part of various autistic communities, but ABA is essentially on the same structure as conversion therapy. So because I know what they're talking about. I can't remember what ABA stands for, but applied behavioral analysis. So like it's effectively teaching autistic people to spend extra mental and emotional energy to appear more normal for the purposes of survival in society or whatever. But it's very, it functions the exact same as conversion therapy, because conversion therapy tries to use the same process to ungay you, and similarly this is to unautistic me. Yeah, autistic self-advocates have been speaking out about the harmful nature of the ABA for a few years now. They're being largely ignored. They assert the ABA is abusive and unethical because it aims to extinguish autistic traits and normalize children, otherizes benign behavior, lacks evidence of effectiveness, works against the development of key life skills and independence, and leads to serious trauma-based mental phenomena and increased suicidality. They've compared ABA to the type of conversion therapy the LGBTQ community has suffered. They're onto something, yes. But yeah, it's so in 2019, a neuropsychologist released a co-authored article with a parent and service provider citing research that shows the unsuitability of ABA for autistic individuals, the current lack of scientific testing regarding ABA's effect on quote-unquote lower functioning and nonverbal autistic people, and highlighting the drivers of expanded use, including the potential current market size of $17 billion annually. This was followed by the pro-ABA community's response, which argued that ABA isn't unethical or ineffective because therapists are bound to the scope and manner of the practice within the ABA Professional and Ethical Compliance Code. That there are hundreds of studies demonstrating ABA's success at reducing behaviors considered problematic by consumer families, and that autism is a neurological disorder and ABA is a scientific approach that provides real-life support for families seeking treatments. Yeah, that's yeah, most autistic people cannot choose to participate in or leave ABA. It's selected for them by family members who reap most of ABA's benefits. As autistic individuals have begun to speak about traumas they've experienced with ABA, this person has seen caregivers, practitioners, agencies, and business people support them by listening and working to enhance their platform, and join the call for empathy, investigation, and construction of responsive solutions that are inclusive of the narratives and experiences of autistic individuals themselves. So it's good that's starting to show up other places. Like I said, I had heard about this like a couple years ago, or maybe around 2019 when the neuropsychology thing was put out. But on a lighter note, mom founds church to protect her trans son's rights. Tiffany Holloway's trans teenager said he'd kill himself if his state outlawed gender-affirming care. She decided to fight back with love and community support. So, Tiffany Holloway, an Oklahoma resident who has a transgender son, founded a church as a way to oppose Republican efforts to criminalize gender-affirming medical care for trans youth. She founded the church after her 16-year-old son told her that he'd attempt suicide if state legislators made it impossible for him to access gender-affirming care. Holloway's son began testosterone hormone therapy 4 years ago, which turned him into a happy, positive child after his initial depression upon realizing his trans identity. While parents of trans youth have fled states that criminalize gender-affirming health care, Holloway launched her church, the Church of Prismatic Light, to fight for the rights of trans youth and LGBTQ people who can't leave their states. Enforced masking is not support, it's compliance training. Yes. That's, of course, referring to the previous story, because of the delay. The church, which has applications for tax-exempt status pending in Oklahoma and the federal government, exists entirely online, isn't based on Christianity, has no central deity, and has the right to medically transition among its central beliefs. It welcomes believers and non-believers of all backgrounds and delivers weekly sermons on LGBTQ history and self-care via TikTok. Among the church's 7 central tenets are inherent rights to bodily autonomy, consensual love, including self-love, self-discovery, and self-presentation. Its tenets state that all beings must act with compassion and empathy towards all living things to the best of their ability, and it's our intrinsic duty to fight for the oppressed and to stand against our oppressors when injustice is being done. Medical decisions are at the discretion of the individual and their healthcare providers alone and shall not be infringed upon. The church's 6th tenet states that this includes gender-affirming medical care and or medical reproductive care. So, due to how they... It's basically trying to use the Republican general way of getting around stuff to be discriminatory as a way to fight against discrimination using the same methods they use for discrimination. So, such as go and its best practices of DFKGF. I don't know what that means, but okay. Thank you for the follow. As of May 15th, Republican-led states have either passed bans on medical care for trans youth or are considering similar laws. Some of the bans have equated gender-affirming care with child abuse and threatened to arrest parents of trans youth detransitioning their kids and placing them into state care. Others attack doctors and threaten them with jail time for providing gender-affirming care to trans youth. Wow, that's amazing parenting. Yes, Jinx Tiamat, that is amazing parent. This is like parent of the year type stuff. So here... I needed to add a few light stories in here. So, Nick Fuentes is claiming that men and women having sex with another is gay. And that being celibate is the only way for a man to truly be straight. Just let that sink in. Just let it sink in. Just a little bit. So, think about it this way. What's gayer than being like, I need cuddles, I need kisses, I need to spend time with a woman? That's very sus. Fuentes said in a December 2021 episode that resurfaced on social media, "I need to spend time with a woman. That's a little sus." So Nick Fuentes is one of the most prominent white supremacists in America. Former YouTuber, got banned for violating its hate speech policy. Now hosts a podcast called America First. He describes himself as an incel, which is a subculture that goes with nationalism way too much. Just gay people do date girls all the time, he said. All these gay people are coming out and saying, "I've had more girlfriends than Nick Fuentes. I've had sex with more girls than Nick Fuentes. That actually makes me really more heterosexual than anyone," Fuentes said, for not having sex. If we're really being honest, never having a girlfriend, never having sex with a woman really makes you more heterosexual, because honestly, dating women is gay, having sex with women is gay, and having sex with men is gay. Really, it's all gay. All sex is apparently gay, according to Nick Fuentes. That was a bit of a refresher. So on to Canadian news. There's a get a job policy fails to recognize what it's like to live with disability in Petersburg. So 500,000 Ontarians living on the Ontario Disability Support Program do not have the choice of a successful career or living in mental or physical agony while in poverty. When directly asked about the ODSP back in April, Premier Doug Ford suggested that people who are unable to work for any reason, be it physically, mentally, I will always support them. I have over the last 4 years. We're going to continue to do that. Yet, when the Ford government took office 4 years ago, a 3% increase to ODSP was planned by Kathleen Wynne. Liberals was slashed to just 1.5%. There has not been an increase since, despite the skyrocketing costs of living. To its core, the mentality of get a job fails to recognize what it's like living with a disability. The ODSP system itself is designed in a way that punishes those who are able to work to some capacity while receiving support. People who rely on disability support can currently earn a mere $200 a month and are given an additional $100 benefit for working, all before the government reduces their disability support payments by 50% of any further earned income. Which is awful. So that actually sounds worse than disability. I think my a friend of mine who's on Social Security income, I think she makes like $1,000 a month, and that's in America. But like, this is just too little. So yeah, no, this is just a problem with the lack of government support with disability stuff. This sounds like what they're doing in the UK as well. Go away. We didn't ask to be injured. Torontonians on the Ontario Disability Support Program fear future without change. So okay, this is just a continuation of the ODSP. I didn't notice that. I missed that. So yeah, they aren't rising it fast enough to adjust for inflation, which is a problem that's been happening with the NHS in Britain for a while. Ford government isn't even trying. Dream of fully accessible Ontario by 2025, out of reach, disability advocates say. Which I'd be happy if there was just fully accessible cities in general in a lot of places. So the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the AODA, was a historic achievement. The new law, passed unanimously, was supposed to make Ontario fully accessible to people with disabilities by 2025. The 20-year timeline felt distant and achievable at the time. But today, even the most optimistic advocates concede it will not be reached. We're at a point where it's impossible for the government to lead Ontario to being fully accessible by 2025, even if it was trying. And this government isn't even trying. SSDI in USA varies on work history. Yeah, that sounds about right. So, Lepofsky, who is blind, called this the most pivotal election for Ontario's 2.6 million people with disabilities since before the AODA was passed. He believes the fatal law and what it promises is at stake. He argues that far from becoming more accessible, Ontario has actually become less accessible. Okay, redeemed stretch. So, actually, that does make me feel better. And more dangerous for people living with disabilities under Doug Ford's progressive conservative government. Progressive conservative government. Isn't that contradictory? Anyways, he points to the disproportionate rates of COVID-19 illness and death suffered by those with disabilities, and what he describes as Ford's one-size-fits-all pandemic response. Ontario is now sharply divided between people who are medically strong and who have no disabilities on the one hand, and vulnerable people with disabilities on the other. This accelerating divide is due to the Ford's government-delivered action. So it's... people don't care about people with disabilities. That's what this seems to be. Governments don't care, which is a continuing thing. And a lot of talk, not a lot of action. So, back to the racism. Did I mention there's a lot of racism? That didn't stop just because we're talking about Canada. Ontario Education Minister took part in a slave auction at a university fraternity. Now, obviously not an actual slave auction. I'm pretty sure slavery was illegal by that point, but a mock slave auction, which is still... Why? So Ontario's Minister of Education participated in a mock slave auction while he was a frat leader at Western University. It happened at 2006. And slave auctions multiple times while Lecce was involved with the frat house. Lecce was identified as one of the slaves auctioned off at the event. Slaves are obligated to be available from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. or other time negotiated with the owner. It says the website archives. An official from the Progressive Conservative Party told the CBC that Lecce has no recollection of the event. I don't believe that. I don't know how you can not believe that. Lecce has since apologized, saying the event from 2006 was inappropriate and in no way reflects who I am as a person and why I unreservedly apologize. I will continue to passionately advance the interests of all Ontarians, irrespective of faith, heritage, orientation, or race. Now, I never know with frat communities like that. I'm sure there's some racist elements still in that person's personality. But that being said, gaming, the most important news: League of Legends star Biofrost comes as gay, with scathing attack on the esports industry. Pro League of Legends player Vincent, quote unquote, Biofrost Wong, has come out as gay, I'm terrible with names sometimes. Anyway, it says come out as gay in a post on social media calling for greater inclusivity in gaming and esports. Biofrost, who plays support for Dignitas League of Legends squad, made the announcement on Twitter, garnering widespread support from fans and other gamers. In the lengthy post, Biofrost shared his experience dealing with issues around his personal identity throughout his life. He explained that he moved around a lot from homestay to homestay while his parents were working in China, and he had been bombarded with homophobic and sexist remarks when he was younger. Whenever I did something that wasn't manly, I was told, "Why are you acting like a girl?" and "Stop being gay." He wrote, "I was hyper-conscious of how I should act and tried not to act or sound gay." That reminds me of middle school. Though, being trans, I also was afraid of the concept of acting too gay. He added, "No child should have to feel like they don't belong." And, almost every team I've been on, I've heard homophobic comments from either my teammates or the staff and felt uncomfortable, even borderline afraid of possibly losing my job if I told the truth. He said, "I'm at the point in my life where I've accepted who I am, and it's taken me a long time to get there." Biofrost said his journey is not unique. He claimed that sexism, prejudice, and homophobia are rampant within the gaming industry. He acknowledged there was no quick fix for such issues, but he said more awareness, education on LGBTQ plus identities, and holding ourselves to a higher standard could help more people in the future be treated with the dignity they deserve. Which, yes. All of that. And, yeah, I would be happy to be supportive of that team. Blackpool's Jake Daniels becomes UK's first pro footballer to come out in more than 30 years. So, Blackpool's star Jake Daniels has come out publicly, becoming the only active gay male professional footballer in the UK. So, it's sad that's taken this long. UK apparently is behind on US when it comes to LGBTQ inclusion. Yeah. So back to awful in the UK. A woman was jailed for, I'm just gonna say how it actually is, for raping a 13-year-old boy to prove he's not gay. So a woman groomed a child with cigarettes and alcohol before raping him to prove He is not gay, leaving the boy emotionally destroyed and suicidal. Lucy Jane Hambley, age 40, initially denied any wrongdoing to the police, but pleaded guilty to 4 counts of sexual activity with a 13-year-old boy, also known as rape. I am going to prove you are not gay, she replied, as she led him to a bedroom, the Truro Crown Court heard. It's really disturbing stuff. The article goes into more detail, but like, I don't want to read it. I don't feel comfortable reading it. It's bad. A 55-year-old man hospitalized after serious homophobic attack in London Park. So, attacker began shouting homophobic abuse at the victim before hitting him over the head. According to Metropolitan Police, the victim was walking with 2 friends in Burgess Par Southwark at around 1:40 a.m. on the 14th of May when the attack took place. The attacker fled the scene along Albany Road, and the victim was taken to the hospital by emergency services. His condition was not life-threatening, according to the BBC. Following the same lockdown restrictions in 2021, the UK saw a concerning rise in anti-LGBTQ hate crimes. Major cities such as London and Liverpool have seen high numbers of homophobic and transphobic attacks over the past year, including the murder of a gay man in London last August. I think I may have covered that one on Rainbow Shelter News. Also in the UK, nearly 14% of UK adults are skipping meals due to high food prices. So new research has found that over 2 million of UK's adults have skipped meals for a whole day over the past month, as food prices hit their highest rates in 30 years. An online survey suggested roughly 1 in 7 adults now live in homes where people have skipped meals, reduced meal sizes, or even gotten hungry because they could not afford to access food. The government, we recognize pressures of cost of living, and we are doing what we can to help, including spending £22 billion across the next financial year to support people with energy bills and cut fuel duty, the hardest hit. We're putting an average of £1,000 more per year into the pocket of working families on universal credit. Also boosted the minimum wage by more than £1,000 a year for full-time workers, and our household support fund is there to help with every essentials. This is likely not enough. If things have gotten this bad, chances are, at best, this will get people scraping by, not thriving. So, Israeli news. So, Abu Akleh was murdered by Abu Akleh is a Palestinian journalist, which Israel targeted and killed. Palestinians were shocked when veteran Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed by Israeli forces while covering an Israeli army raid on the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Abu Akleh was a Palestinian icon whose familiar face and voice had entered the homes of millions of Palestinians and Arabic speakers around the world for more than 2 decades as she covered the Israeli occupation. She was one of the brave Palestinian whose voices covered the Israel's deadly incursion on the refugee camp in 2002, which she wrote about last year, saying, "To me, Jen is not one ephemeral story in my career, or even in my personal life. It is a city that can raise my morale and help me fly. It embodies the Palestinian spirit that sometimes trembles and falls out. Beyond all expectations, rises to pursue its flights and dreams." Now, 20 years later, Abu Akla was killed in the same place where she valiantly told the stories of Palestinian resistance under occupation. But yeah, she's wearing a press jacket. Welcome, new followers. We look forward to chatting with you when you've followed for at least 10 minutes. Yes. Despite the clear markings, Abu Akla was shot in the face, and another Palestinian journalist was shot in the back. Despite Israeli claims that Abu Akla was hit by Palestinian gunfire, journalist presence at the scene says it was an Israeli sniper that targeted them. Not the only Palestinian journalist and killed, and so in other news, this is an opinion, but basically the new prime minister in Sri Lanka may or may not be help. So a lot of unrest in Sri Lanka, and a bunch of complicated stuff. I'm regretting picking the Sri Lanka story. I didn't realize it's more complicated. So, a woman in El Salvador accused of having an abortion after obstetric emergency, sentenced to 30 years in prison. So, 28-year-old El Salvadorian woman has been sentenced to 30 years in prison after she was accused of having an abortion following a medical emergency. The Associated Press reports that the woman, only identified as Esme, was found guilty of aggravated homicide. The judge acted with partiality, giving greater weight to the version offered by the Attorney General's office, which was loaded with stigmas and gender stereotypes. The Citizen Group for the Decriminalization of Abortion said in a statement. The organization also helped Esme with her defense. She had been pre-trial detention for 2 years before she was released in October 2021. In October 2019, she had gone to a public hospital while pregnant, and the hospital employees reported her to the police after she miscarried. This sentence is a blow to our efforts to release women unjustly incarcerated and a violation of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which has said obstetric emergencies must be treated as a health problem. Morena Herrera, president of the Citizen Group, told the outlet. El Salvador is among 5 Latin American countries that have completely prohibited abortions. Women who are convicted of abortion face prison sentences after suffering through miscarriages, and have been charged with homicide before. The same rule applies even when the women are raped or their lives are at risk. Esme is the first woman in 7 years to face a prison sentence for abortion. During the last 20 years, around 180 women in the country have been prosecuted following obstetric emergencies that caused them to lose their babies. According to AP, since 2009, 64 women have been released in El Salvador, and since December, 8 women's prison sentences have been reduced. This is the end result of anti-abortion this is the goal. This sort of stuff. This yeah. On a brighter note, Tokyo will start recognizing same-sex civil unions. Marriage equality, though, remains out of reach. So essentially what the Democrats were proposing back in 2000 something, I don't know, whenever Hillary was like obsessing over same-sex unions, over marriage, but so right now Japan doesn't offer LGBTQ non-discrimination protection or same-sex marriage. As a result, LGBTQ people in Japan often face inequalities in employment, housing, education, and healthcare. Also in Japan, you have to be made so that you can't have children if you transition, for you to be legally recognized as a different gender. And in March 2021, a Japanese court ruled that the country's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional. In 2019, another Japanese court ruled that trans people can no longer be banned from bathrooms. However, Japan is still a long road ahead for full LGBTQ rights. Yes. Across Europe, African students fight to study after Ukraine exit. So apparently a bunch of people are in legal limbo. Adamita Esther, I can't pronounce this name, has lost count of the number of university applications she has filled out since fleeing the war in Ukraine. The 22-year-old Nigerian student found refuge in the neighboring country Hungary on March 10th, having escaped weeks of relentless shelling by Russian troops who had surrounded Sumy, the city which she was studying medicine since 2021. But this person struggles to find a scholarship before the temporary permit allowing her to stay in Hungary expires in early June. 10,000 African students who were studying in Ukraine before Russia's invasion are now spread across Europe, facing obstacles as they seek to fill educational aspirations. Yeah. Return home not viable, but yeah, apparently them being able to get scholarships or maybe even transfer their credits has clearly been a nightmare with all this. Now, another note, queer Ukrainian couple fighting side by side say they're ready to die defending their home from Putin. Alexander Zugin, I can't pronounce names. Sometimes I'm bad. I'm very American. Watched from their apartment in Kiev as news broke that Russia had invaded Ukraine's eastern borders. The next morning, they decided to join Ukraine's territorial defense forces. Now, there are negative things with Ukrainian defense stuff, but neither Zugin, a 37-year-old gay man, nor his partner Romanova, a 37-year-old trans non-binary person who uses she/her pronouns, had any previous military experience. Although Ukraine's military service is compulsory, both were exempt. So, but yeah, they felt they had no other choice but to risk their lives. That is often the case when it's a choice between when it's a choice between keeping your rights or dying, people generally choose to keep their rights. So this is Spain approves plans to become the first European country to introduce paid menstrual leave. This needs to happen everywhere. Spain's government has greenlit plans to allow women to take unlimited paid menstrual leave from work in a European first. The proposal, endorsed by ministers on Tuesday, is part of a broader package on reproductive rights that include allowing teenagers to seek abortion from the age of 16 without need to get their parent or guardian's consent. The government has agreed on the draft law, which will still need to be passed by Spain's parliament, a legislative process that could take several months. But this better get passed. I want this to get passed so badly. I know I don't live in Spain, but like I want women in people who have bad menstrual cycles, whoever they are, need this. Basically, time for government institutions to discard taboos, stigmas, and guilt regarding women's bodies. The days of women going to work in pain are over. Because, yeah, some people have really bad periods. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they don't. It really depends on the person. And that shouldn't take away from your ability to get work. And have a decent life. Similarly, in Europe, elsewhere in Europe, Polish court strikes down 2 LGBT free zones for gross violation law. So, courts annulled 2 more of Poland's so-called LGBT free zones for being a gross violation law and presenting LGBTQ people as evil. So almost 100 municipal or local governments have declared themselves free of LGBT ideology in Poland. At one point, so-called LGBT free zones covered almost a third of the country. A number of authorities have scrapped their LGBT free pledges after being threatened with the loss of EU funding, with more being voided following legal challenges. 2 more were dissolved by court order recently on the 9th. Lublin Regional Assembly passed a resolution in April 2019 declaring that LGBTQ rights aim to annihilate the values shaped by the Catholic Church. To stop this from happening, the province pledged to stand up against homo propaganda. That's a new one. In the same month, Riki County, a district in Lublin, passed a resolution voting to protect children, young people, families, and Polish schools from an apparent wave of homo terror being unleashed by left liberal groups. Wow, this is where the conservative governments want to go towards. Intimidating, hostile, and offensive atmosphere for LGBTQ plus Poles by presenting the queer community as a threat to the government and an evil that must be fought, the court found. In addition, it added that both local authorities discourage tolerance towards LGBT people. For example, by promoting a mom-dad-child model of family, both authorities were able to deem queer families unworthy of protection, assistance, and support. Yeah, so, yeah. That's its own battle going on. Anti-LGBTQ plus This is supposed to be here. Anyway, anti-LGBTQ Greek priest urges prime minister to block same-sex marriage. A rabble of priests from the Greek Orthodox Church are urging Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis. I can't. I'm terrible with pronunciation. To oppose same-sex marriage, calling it a deviation and a perversion of nature. The priests have signed a letter to the PM in response to a national campaign video advocating for same-sex marriage called Say Yes. However, priests are trying to prevent Greece from joining the 21st century and legislating same-sex marriage. The priests whined in their letter that their stance is a testimony to the church. The letter also states the Greek Orthodox Church will not accept a law of this nature to pass. They will only accept heterosexual marriages and will not accept any other kind of marriage for its members. The priests also found time to take a swipe at trans people too, because of course they did. Saying, even those Christians who maintain a loose relationship with the church know that God created two sexes, male and female, and there is no third sex. Greece is one of the few European countries remaining where same-sex marriage is not legal. Italy, Estonia, and the Czech Republic are like Greece in that they allow legal partnerships, but marriage is a no-go. Although Greece banned conversion therapy, but will not cover consenting adults, which is a loophole that's in the UK conversion therapy ban. Which, speaking of which, UK. I believe the Greek ban might be better because broad conversion therapy ban would infringe free speech. Sure it would. But I don't know what LGBT plus. Okay. The council is fine for violating one unless they get the. Yeah. So basically, it's consent to torturous practice is generally a way that they get around this sort of stuff, but it doesn't seem to exclude trans people, like the Tory conversion therapy ban, which has finally come about. So there's going to be a ban on conversion therapy that the Tories do, which also, same loophole. So it's one of those things where if you torture people enough, they can, quote unquote, give consent or whatnot. After the fact. And it's still easy way to abuse, and plus parental consent might factor into that. Yeah, so it only protects, the UK ban only protects sexual orientation. Conversion therapy, based around gender identity, still an option. And finally, South Korea official apologizes for vile anti-gay comments and somehow makes it even worse. A senior government official under South Korea's new president has publicly apologized after massive backlash for comparing homosexuality to a mental illness. the newly appointed region and multicultural secretary under the president was called out for a Facebook post from 2019, which he said homosexuality was a sort of mental illness. He added that he didn't endorse being part of the LGBTQ plus community, and he was summarily banned from Facebook due to the social media's platform hate speech regulations. Kim, who is the person who said this stuff, said in a statement on social media that he sincerely apologizes for some of his problematic comments in the past. This includes statements he made about the LGBTQ plus community and victims of sexual slavery during the Japanese occupation of South Korea. But his apology caused further outrage after he claimed that being queer could be quote-unquote treated and appeared to encourage the widely debunked pseudoscientific practice of LGBTQ plus conversion therapy. I respect the diversity in sexual orientation that individuals have, but I'm personally against homosexuality, he said. And while there are those with innate homosexual tendencies, I think many cases people mistakenly think of it as a basic instinct, even though they acquired it as a habit. Kids need more rights. Yes, they do, to not be put into conversion therapy. So yeah, this is just awful stuff, and we are that's the final story. I'll leave it up only to do that, and let's see who we can raid. No one's really doing similar topics, so I'm just gonna end it here. Thank you if you watched. And if you enjoyed the content, also thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Sex and race, because they are easy, visible differences, have been the primary ways of organizing human beings into superior and inferior groups, and into the cheap labor on which this system still depends.
No, you all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all?
We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
All we are doing with this bill is allowing two people who love each other to have that love recognised by way of marriage. That is all we are doing.
I speak not for myself, but for those without voice can be heard. Those who have fought for their rights, their right to live in peace.
Sometimes, especially in this body, I feel as though if Christ himself walked through these doors and said what he said thousands of years ago, he would be maligned as a radical and rejected from these doors.